Thank you, Paul. It's always nice to sing. I love that. So we now welcome our speaker, Jonathan Connor, from Zion and Manning, to present on social media and amongst other things.
Very good. Thank you. Okay, so this is something that's been a great interest and passion of mine for the last couple of years, and I'll give you some background on kind of how I came to this. I've done this, so you see family discipling event. I forgot to change the first screen just because I did this with a family group at our church. But I have had conversations with school superintendents, teachers, doctors, police officers, AEA specialists, school counselors, district judge in our area. And I asked the same question, very open-ended, not trying to plant an answer in their head. But I've listened to some of the concerns they have about some of the things they see happening, especially with our young people, but even with our parents and so forth. And I've said, well, okay, you've described some of the issues you see that are part of our culture now. If you had to pick out one thing, not that would be the thing that's causing all these things, but one thing you may see recurring that would be a common denominator maybe in all of these, that could be a main contributing factor to some of these symptoms you're describing, what is it you would say? And they've all said exactly the same thing: screens. I didn't say to them, what do you think about screens? I didn't use them. I just said, what do you think it is? And I've had multiple conversations with these professionals. They've all said screens. So my thought is, golly, we probably ought to think about this. If these screens are ubiquitous, they're in pretty much everybody's pocket here right now, or your purse. You've got it with you all the time. And we have screens this size, we have screens tablet size, we have screens TV size, we have the screens are everywhere, they're ubiquitous. So I think it's important that we talk about these things, because sometimes they're so ubiquitous that we don't even realize that they're there, or the impact they're having on us and on young people. And the young people, I think, are the most susceptible, and we'll talk about why. It has to do with with brain development, and we'll talk a little bit about that. I'll have resources to share. Did I hand out the resource page yet or not? If I didn't, I will later. I've got a resource page. You should have in front of you the slide page to take notes with. I encourage you to jot notes. But if you have questions, I'm happy to email resources to you or answer questions.
We didn't pass out the
Okay,
resource page.
I'll make sure I'll get that to you.
Okay.
You don't need it right now. There's nothing you're going to do with it right now, but I'll get it to you before we're done. Okay, I do want to say up front that while there are many good uses for screens, I mean, here I'm using a screen today, right? Robert's filming today, and hopefully people will be able to watch this on a screen. So I do believe there are many good uses for screens. So I'm not here to say screens are bad, don't have screens. That would be a little bit silly, because we got screens everywhere up here. But I do want us to understand that screens do come at a cost, especially screens in the context of social media and gaming and this sort of use for screens. There is definitely a cost that comes with these things, and we need to be very sober about this. So I want to start by talking about this wonderful chemical or neurotransmitter called dopamine, and probably most of you have heard of dopamine. It's this wonderful chemical that God has put in our brains that has the potential to produce great pleasure. You can think of dopamine like this little pleasure rush that your brain has the ability to push through your body. It's involved in reward, it's involved in motivation, it's involved in memory, in attention, even regulation of body movement. So dopamine's kind of important. And like I said, it really is a remarkable gift from God. But it is susceptible to manipulation. And I want to say up front, the smartphone manufacturers, app developers, gaming programmers, they know this. They know this. There's a science to this. We're going to talk about this. Nicholas, I could never pronounce his name. I have his book here. I remembered I have a whole pile of books, and what I'll do is pass these around. I want them all back. But these are all excellent resources. I'm going to start here by holding one up so you can see, and I'll pass them around a little later for the break. This one, I don't agree with all of his worldview. but he's got some great insights. But he's done some research and is citing some research in his book. He talks about this. Brain imaging shows that eating can raise dopamine levels by 50%. So there's a pleasure rush oftentimes that goes with eating, right? Like, especially the donuts out there. Like, there's a big pleasure rush. Sex can raise the dopamine level by 100%. It's a pretty big pleasure rush. Snorting cocaine can raise it by 350%. Ingesting crystal meth by 1,200%. So you can get some scales here and see why some of these things are so addictive. Video games increase it by 100%. There's a major pleasure rush that you get through gaming. And we'll talk a little more about this as we go along. I'll smart myself and put my stuff down. But here's what Nicholas says in his book. I'm going to quote him at length for a second because I want you to appreciate what he says. Okay, dopaminergic, that means the dopamine response. Okay, so big fancy word, dopaminergic drugs or digital platforms provide a shortcut to our dopamine reward system that can be repeatedly engaged in for hours or even days at a time. Using these substances or engaging in these experiences repeatedly and for prolonged periods also floods the nucleus accumbens, a section of your brain, with too much dopamine for extended periods of time, yet without serving any essential biological function. When people become addicted, they experience a dopamine reduction or shutdown in order to give at least some relief to their overwhelmed receptor cells. With this reduced capacity to produce dopamine naturally, the addicted person then needs to ingest more of the addictive substance or engage in more of the addictive behavior, as in more and more time on social media, for example, just to maintain his or her baseline dopamine levels, okay? Some stuff going on in the brain. So he says, this in a classic addiction catch-22, chronic exposure to addictive substances or behaviors reduces the gray matter in the frontal cortex up here, the brain's decision-making braking system. Okay, the prefrontal cortex, stop the quote for a second here. This is really associated with your impulse control. Think of it as these are the brakes on your car engine. Okay, you kind of need those. These are the brakes. These are the thing in your brain that, and this thing doesn't actually get fully mature to your late 20s, which may explain, in some sense, youth risk-taking behavior. Why? Because this part of the brain isn't fully developed, and there are certain things in your life now, you look at this and you say, I don't think I want to do that. Because you're able to have this moment where you say, there could be a consequence to that sort of behavior that's going to be painful to me or painful to someone I love. And you have this braking system fully developed. Youths don't have that. So he goes on, he says, it reduces the gray matter in the frontal cortex, the brain's decision-making braking system associated with impulse control, which in turn then compromises a person's ability to not engage in addictive substance or behavior. In essence, addiction breaks our brakes. So what's happening is, and we're going to talk about how, but excessive exposure to screens and specifically social media and gaming, this actually reduces the efficiency and the braking potential of the frontal cortex. It breaks the brakes. That should concern us. And we're going to talk a little bit when we get to the brain function section about the pruning that actually goes on in your brain. The synaptic connections are being pruned, especially it happens in a major way, even embryonically. But the pruning part, though, the connections are made in the embryo stage, but they go all the way through adolescence. There's a pruning stage where the brain is going to get more efficient. And it's going to prune the parts that aren't being used because the brain says, we don't need them. We're not using them. So in order to build the super highways that are going to make the brain the most efficient possible, we're going to get rid of the things we don't need. So the brain is doing. And it does that especially in adolescence. So if we have a behavior pattern that is showing us that it actually breaks the brakes, it's actually impeding the frontal cortex's ability to mature and develop the executive function control or the governor control. If there's something we know from watching the brain science that it's doing this, we ought to say, well, maybe we shouldn't be doing this so much. This could be a concern. And that's what's happening. We're breaking the brakes. I tell my kids, it shrinks your brain. And that's actually true. There's actually a reduction in gray matter shown. So it does shrink your brain. So, and it primes us for addiction. Okay, there's another book, I don't have that one with me. It's called Irresistible, and it has a long subtitle. He says, as the brain develops a tolerance, its dopamine-producing regions go into retreat. And the lows between each high dip lower, instead of producing the healthy measure of dopamine that once inspired optimism and contentment in response to small pleasures. These regions lie dormant until they're overstimulated again. Addictions are so pleasurable that the brain does two things. First, it produces less dopamine to dam the flood of euphoria. And then, when the source of that euphoria vanishes, it struggles to cope with the fact that it's now producing far less dopamine than it used to. And so the cycle continues as the addict seeks out the source of his addiction, and the brain responds by producing less and less dopamine after each hit. Okay, this is a bad thing. You need more of it to get the same pleasure. And like I mentioned, they know this. So Seth Godin, he writes this, former .com business executive. He's called smartphones Pavlovian boxes. Pavlov, the Russian scientist, 1890s. You ring the bell and the dog drools. Okay, that whole experiment. Here's what he writes. The smartphone is an optimized, tested, and polished call and response machine. So far, Apple's made $1 trillion by ringing our bell. Because right now, if your phone vibrates, it'll be everything. It'll take all of your control not to check that text. Because the bell rings, and you will salivate. You are well trained. I don't know how else to put this, but all of us, we are being manipulated. Okay? And we'll talk through this. Companies have invested massive resources into tracking every move you make online to deepen their understanding of how to ring your bell. Okay? So they can manipulate your desires. Another author says this. Every swipe and click, but also every video you watch and how far you watched it. Every time you linger over an animated GIF, or just swipe on by. And certainly every post you post, everything you upload or share is cataloged and linked to this vast amount of data about you. Over time, the history of every like, every pin, every email, every swipe, every hashtag creates an epic digital biography for you. There's literally this instruction book that anyone or anything can read to learn what works on you and what doesn't. Developers go so far to pay attention to which background colors, which fonts, which audio tones maximize and retain your attention, and which ones don't. And they've got this down to a science. It's actually called the desire engine. And there are 4 stages to the desire engine, all right? First, you need some sort of trigger, okay? You can call this clickbait if you want to online, but there's some sort of trigger that's going to get you to take some sort of action. Click on a photo, tap on a video. So this is bait, all right? So you're being baited. Just appreciate that. You are being baited. Then the thing that they know will get you hooked is the variable reward. Let me talk about how this works, okay? It's really important that the reward is not the same every time. That's critical. So for example, let's pretend you have a refrigerator with an ice dispenser, all right? That ice dispenser is not very addictive to you. You are not finding yourself with this urge every day to run up to that thing. Now, if you have a 4-year-old, they think it's great. But you are not addicted to the ice dispenser. You don't find yourself saying, I just have to push that one more time. But if every so often it spat out a strawberry daiquiri, or a root beer float, or something of that nature. Every so often, you didn't know when, but every so often, that was going to come out. That can become addictive. because it's the promise of a potential reward. Okay, so it's that promise that has the power to form habit. And if it leads you to believe that your chances of getting that daiquiri or that root beer float or whatever, or that slushy, that it increases every time you push it, like the chances get better, it's going to get better every time, then you're going to find yourself drawn to that ice maker with repeated frequency. That's what's actually happening on your phone. Okay, a gentleman writes the book called Hooked: How to Build Habit-Forming Products, explains this. App developers know this, and they add many variable rewards to keep us hooked. Even the anticipation of a possible reward causes a user's dopamine levels to spike before they even open their favorite app. In fact, that's what dopamine is so good at. It is the anticipation drug in your body. Okay? It is the thing, it's the thing that gets you excited about opening a present because you don't know what's in it. And once you've opened it and you've had it for a couple of days, it's like, oh, it's not that exciting anymore. That's why that ding on your phone or the vibration on your phone, it's like this shot of dopamine that says, ooh, what can it be? And you want to know. It's the want to know, want to discover, want to learn. And dopamine can be a really good thing for motivation if, like for me, I know I get a dopamine high when I'm learning something I'm excited about. If it's just something I'm really interested in, oh man, I can forget about the rest of the world, right? And get lost in this thing that I'm learning about. And I have to be very careful because then it's like, oh my goodness, I've neglected everything else, right? Because it's this discovery. And dopamine always says, it's really one word, more. Dopamine is never reaches, these are different drugs in the brain, like the serotonin, oxytocin. These are the more contented with what you have and so forth. But the desire for more is this dopamine. So game developers then exploit this, all right? Streak rewards. You've got to keep your streak, because if you do, you get more rewards. If you break your streak, you're starting over. So you need to check in every day. You need to have at least complete one round, whatever. You got to keep your streak reward. There are bonuses that are hidden throughout the game, right? You don't know where, and they're weighted toward the early stages. They get less frequent as the gamer progresses. But the rewards are there. You don't know where, but if you keep playing, they'll be there. And the goal here is to move the trigger internal, so that you don't have to have your phone vibrate to say, I just need to check one more time on Facebook. I need to check Instagram one more. I need to just one more time. I need to check that. So now it's internal. Now the mere thought of your phone says, ooh. So it doesn't have to ding or vibrate, all right? It doesn't have to do that anymore. That's the desire engine. And they've invested massive resources into this. And it works. It works really well on you. It works really well on your children and grandchildren. It works really well. They're good at what they do. Something else they do. They remove the stopping cues. Okay, so let me just do a thought experiment with you. Anyone who's ever used Facebook, if I were to say to you, get your Facebook app out and scroll to the bottom. Why do you laugh?
There's no bottom.
There's no bottom.
I have no Facebook.
What's that?
Because I have no Facebook.
That's right. Well, if you were to take anybody's Facebook and try to go to the bottom, that's the thing. There's no bottom. None. That's intentional. That's on purpose. Because the human brain has a desire to reach completion. And you find great satisfaction in, how many of you like doing a job halfway and having to quit? That's the worst. That's the worst feeling, because you're not done. You are never done. That's on purpose. So, the average child, according to data, this is shared by a great resource called Screen Strong, and this is on my resource list, which I'll hand out later. But screenstrong.com. They also have a podcast that they do. Excellent. They bring in all kinds of top-notch scientists and researchers and so forth. Very data-driven.
What was the
Screen Strong, SCREEN Strong, STRONG.com. So you can go to their website. They actually have, and I've been working through it slowly, they have this massive course that you can purchase and take. It's incredibly well done. It's just massive, and I haven't had a lot of free time to work there. About halfway through.
So it's unfinished, so you hate it.
That's exactly right. I'm not finished, and that's very unsettling to me. But I have to live within the confines of reality. But their research shows that the average child spends over 52 hours a week. A full-time job is 40 hours, just so you're all on the same page here. 52 hours a week in front of electronic media. Some of it's required for school, but a disturbingly large percentage of the screen time is spent in front of social media and or digital games. So, there's a great book here called Screen Schooled, where you have a couple teachers who are starting to, well, many, but these two are representing them, rethink the place of screens in school. And it's a complicated question, because different screens communicate different things. A big screen is a different thing than an individual screen. A big screen is a shared experience where we all participate together. An individual screen fragments that, and we'll talk about that later on. So they're very nuanced in how they're asking this question. They're not saying, oh my goodness, you can't have any screens in your school. No. But there should be some thoughtfulness. But they're starting to rethink the role of screens in schools. And let's see if I get too far ahead of myself, because I've got a section on this later. But this would be like laptops and phones in schools. In fact, our school in Manning finally is trying to enforce the phones go in the phone caddy when you walk in the classroom. They're trying with mixed success. But smartphones, have this never-ending stream of notifications. You know this, right? That is a major distraction in class. Major. Kids believe devices, especially the small screen devices, like Chromebooks or phones, that those are actually entertainment devices. That's the way they see those things. We think they're tools, and we use them for entertainment too, but they see them as entertainment. So they find it very difficult to switch gears in the classroom. And the dopamine reward is very strong and addictive. So this is the promise of something new, of a reward, of something, the surprise trigger, right? The surprise triggers this desire for reward. And that extended time in front of the screen offers the possibility of this dopamine reward. It's very hard for kids to resist. And the ease of accessing information online diminishes kids' abilities to develop strong memories. They don't have to know, because they can look it up. So back to this. This is how these developers know how to keep us, it's called engagement, to keep us engaged. But how do they keep our eyes glued to the screen? So you take away the stopping cues, like I said, all right? You have other sections in life where stopping cues are very normal. In a book, what would be a natural stopping cue? How if you needed to put the book down, what's the stopping cue in a book?
Chapter
End of the chapter, or page break, paragraph. These are stopping cues. Like when I'm reading a book, I don't always get to finish a chapter and I have to put it down. But if I know I need to put it down, like for me, I always stop reading at the top left end of the first partial paragraph. So the first full paragraph, I can pick up my book and know that's where I'm starting. So that's where I stopped. So in my brain, that's my stopping cue. But it's the paragraph for me is where I know that's a natural place. I don't stop in the middle of a paragraph. That's a weird place to stop, right? That would be very unsettling. Well, you wouldn't do that. On movies, what's the stopping cue? The credits. The credits at the end. On a traditional television program,
Commercials.
Yeah, commercials, or at the end when the credits come on. Okay, we have a stopping cue, and we have the option to say turn it off or next show comes on, right? You have the option at that point. The stopping cue is there. But social media and even gaming developers, they know the stopping cues give you the opportunity to stop, which loses engagement. So take away the stopping cues, maximize engagement. So, like I mentioned, this is greatly distressing to the human brain because we have this innate desire to reach the end, just to discover the bottom, to find a good stopping point. Like if I was reading a book and it had no paragraph markers, that's very hard. It'd be very hard. Where do you stop then?
The Greek New Testament.
Exactly. The Greek New Testament may be distressing if they haven't broken it up for us. It's very helpful to have it broken up, right? Exactly.
Pastor Connor,
Yep.
is this why youth can find themselves gaming all night long?
Yes, because you never win the game. There's no place to stop. No, the game never ends. That's exactly right. There's no stopping cue.
Is this what they're trying to do at the end of movies, after the credits? Extra little vignettes too?
Anything that says, don't stop. Don't stop. Stopping loses your eyes. And what do they want? See, here's the thing. Your eyeballs can be monetized. That's what it's about. Maximize engagement, maximize monetization. I don't know how else to put it. You're being manipulated. That's just, they've hired neuroscientists and psychologists, the best in the world, to figure out how to maximize engagement. You take away the stopping cues. This is also one of the reasons why social media almost always leaves you unfulfilled. Because you never get closure. Ever. You never get the feeling of completion. It never allows you to feel like you've finished something. And it turns out that's very distressing to the human brain. To have a world where you've never finished something. There's no feeling of you've accomplished something. Like I mentioned, digital games, very similar. You never win the game. You advance levels, you improve your status, you accrue more points, but you're never done. That's by design. Because it's about keeping you engaged, right? And like I mentioned, it's about monetization. And there are many kids, or many parents who've lost their kids in this gaming world. They just have lost their kids to it. It is so addictive, and the dopamine rush, it's so powerful. So here, a word on gaming. Now, what we're finding is boys tend to gravitate toward gaming more than girls, although girls still game. Social media tends to capture girls more than boys. Now that's just, it's not like a hard and fast rule. It's just what the trends show. So why is this so appealing to boys? This is really fascinating. Why is the gaming world, by and large, more appealing to boys? Well, think about what they're doing in the game world. Okay, what are they doing?
Hugging.
They're probably not hugging. They are conquering.
And destroying.
They're defeating, right? But it's more than just destroying. They are, though. They're conquering, defeating, they're protecting. Yes, there's killing, but for the most part, killing is not actually the main point. Although there are many convincing studies that show that this excessive exposure to this can increase violent activity. All right. Monkey see, monkey do, or more in scientific terms, something called mirror neurons. This is fascinating. It's mirror neurons, which is also why viewing pornography is such a bad idea, because not just the moral component, but the mirror neurons. And believe you me, and Nick, you've had to do this research on this. This stuff plays out in dating relationships in some very unhealthy ways. But it's mirror neurons, that's what's going on. So, but boys, when they're playing these video games, they're on an epic quest to rescue, deliver, and save. Now, while I have my own feelings about games, and we don't have gaming in our house, and we don't have social media in our house, and you can say, oh, what a mean dad. Actually, I had this conversation with my 16-year-old here a couple months ago. I was explaining to him why we don't do social media, why we don't do gaming, and why you can't have your phone at night in your room. Why that is just a no-go. It's a nope forever as you're in my house, okay? Why is that? I went through all the brain pruning process and the myelination process and what's going on in your young brain. And he said, Dad, I think you're a psycho dad. And he said then, thank you. But he said, in a good way. I said, you're welcome. You're welcome. But, so I have my own feelings about turning our kids over to this. Once you see, there are actually some noble desires built in here, all right? What they're doing is the very thing that they are being shunned for in the 3D world. How friendly is our world to men today? Toxic masculinity, right? These desires to defend and protect and to conquer and to save, these are the desires our world calls toxic masculinity, the patriarchy, all these, they like to use all these negative things. Has those things been abused? Of course they've been abused. Of course they have been. But gaming presents them a world that they can control, one which they demonstrate competence, and one that provides a sense of belonging. If boys lived in the game, their invested time actually may prove helpful. But the problem is they don't actually live. Now, time-wise, it may seem like that, but they don't actually live in the game. So they're investing, the time they're investing, it turns out it proves to be detrimental for life in the 3D world. I'd like to call this building our house upon the pixel. And if Jesus were to tell the parable today, I think he'd warn us against building our house on the pixel. Right? Because at the end of the day, they're just illuminated light dots. And you have nothing. At the end of the day, and the game is off, there's nothing. There's nothing. Just pixels. So when kids, or even adults, and we have many full-grown males, I don't want to call them adults, full-grown males who are addicted to gaming. Just addicted. But when they go online to game, their brains, and specifically their executive function, the thing responsible for managing life in the 3D world, like appointments, time management, responsibilities, these things, that executive function goes offline. I mean, it's gone. And the dopamine reward cycle so strong, here's the problem, is the real life seems dull and uninteresting by comparison. There's nothing in the 3D world that's nearly that exciting for them. So they just like, well, what's the point of it? All they think about is get back to the game. I mean, who cares about algebra or chemistry when you have Fortnite?
So, as someone who plays video games,
Yep.
not like I'm not doing it. There are other aspects to it that are also the reason why it is now a way to make money, so you can legitimately do it as a career.
Yes, yep, there's money in it.
And it's also why some women are gaming now, because there's like, this is something I don't understand, but a lot of young people, they like to watch people play games.
Oh, this is a huge
which is
thing.
completely unfathomable to me. I'm like, what is the
They've
point of
got
that?
filled stadiums.
To
They
watch
sell
people play.
tickets to watch people play
Oh,
games.
yeah.
Sports.
Yeah, like, well, and like kids will
Yes.
just be like, they'll go on YouTube, watch some other person play a video game. Like, wouldn't you just want to do it yourself? Like, no, this is good. I can't understand that.
Sure.
But so you can make it as a career, and you can make
Yep,
money. You
yep.
can get on like Twitch and
I get
all these
that.
other things,
I
and you
get
can
that.
play it. I don't do any of that stuff. But I mean, and a lot of the things that like older men are doing, they're not even doing the like imaginative gaming. It's usually just like you get on Call of Duty, which I don't play that anyway, and you just get on with your friends and you just shoot each other in a
Right.
little like sandbox for like 5 hours with each other, talking to each other.
Yeah.
Or like, you can do like Madden, any of the sports games too.
Mhm.
So like they're not even doing the like exploring games where they grow. It's just a matter of like you get on there with your friends, you're shooting, you make fun of each other, you talk trash to each other, you mock each other. And it's like what you did when you were in college and you just hung out with each other, that kind of thing.
Yes.
There's different kinds of gaming, I guess, is the point.
That is true. There are different kinds of gaming. I think that it's this hard line to walk between like, well, this is just simply recreational gaming and it's okay. And there may be a place for that. But all I want to say is fire will still burn you if you're not careful. I mean, so the point I'm making is games are not neutral. I'm not saying they're all necessarily bad. We can't think of them as simply neutral. Like the way I like to say it is, fire, is it good or bad?
Yes.
Right, it depends. If it's in your fireplace, it's good. If it's on your couch, not so great, right? So you have to understand games, it's like a fire.
Yeah, I guess my point is just like the reasoning, like when you're talking to somebody who games, the reasons why they game could be very different.
Sure.
Because like I have no interest in the like, let's shoot a bunch of people and conquer something. That is not interesting to me. To me, I like the sense of completion are a lot of fun. Like nothing makes me more upset than when you play a game and there's you
end.
can't. Like I
Yeah.
hate like World of Warcraft. It thrives under never being done.
Right.
Versus
right.
some of them are like when I play Mario, for example. Those are so much fun to like. All right, I literally got everything. Like I got every star, whatever the
Right,
thing is,
right.
and that's kind of like a fun thing. And they're
Sure,
tricky
sure.
and fun to go through the puzzles or whatever. But anyways, everybody does it for different reasons,
Yep,
and
yep,
it
they are
can be
definitely-
really destructive, obviously.
Yep, but it's also can be very addictive.
Yes.
Right, that's the thing. Things to remember, like little gamers become big gamers. I mean, this is a real thing, and knowing that this has the potential to be exceedingly addictive. Again, doesn't mean we can't have games in our world? No, but we can't be naive and think this is just a neutral thing. All the research says it's not neutral. The more time a person spends online, and gaming especially, they will run into, I call it immature content. It's labeled as mature content, but that's not really mature. Immature. So, for instance, did you know that Minecraft has over 20,000 YouTube videos with instructions on how to build a functional penis and to access sex hotels? You can do that in Minecraft. Did you know that? If you play it long enough, now I've never played Minecraft, but I'm reading the research. Grand Theft Auto has elements that include a strip club with pole dancers, lap dancers, graphic sexual acts, rampant shootings of police, killing the prostitute after you have finished the transaction so you can get your virtual money back, and other violence against women. Fortnite has a host of hypersexualized skins, and that's the layers you put on your weapons and so forth. This is a multi-million, almost probably getting close to $1 billion industry of just purchasing the skins to decorate your weapons. Right? Think of the resources that. They also have a presence on Pornhub, which is, as far as I'm aware, like one of the largest porn sites in the world. And maybe you would know, you've done the research on it. Maybe I don't know, but Pornhub, if it's not I've seen that name in multiple contexts. It's a big deal.
23 billion pages
Yeah.
on Pornhub.
Yeah. So,
Wow.
yeah. And every Disney character has a porn character. The longer they spend time on these things, they will find this.
For like my little grandkids,
Mhm.
can go so far accidentally, or is this lead in?
Oh,
Because I know this Fortnite is something, I'm ignorant about a lot of
it's
this.
both, because see, what happens is, especially with online games, they can game with anybody in the world. Okay, so another side point, which I'm not going to go into, so if let me ask the question, if your grandkids can talk to anybody in the world, could anybody in the world make suggestions to your grandkids they didn't go in thinking beforehand? Yes. Could they expose them to things they didn't know about beforehand? Yes. Now, are there ways to put controls on this? Some.
Buy a Nintendo.
But yeah, so yeah, exactly. But a Nintendo is not connected to the internet.
Well, you can still do it, but it's one of the reasons why people buy it, which is why we have it in our house.
Because it doesn't.
You can't do online chatting.
Exactly.
Stuff.
So there are ways, but the thing is, again, as the addiction builds, the desire for the next level will be there. But so if there's access to the internet, it's access to anybody in the world. And just because the person online says they're also 13 or 12, I know in human trafficking, this is a method how they access, oftentimes through gaming. They befriend and they love bomb and then begin to manipulate people. So your grandkids, for instance, they may not go on there looking for any of this. They may be completely innocent and naive and want to just have fun and perfectly normal. But we can't pretend as if these realities don't exist, because it's not just what they're searching for, it's who's searching for them. And that's all this other material. It's it's searching for them. So,
Could you say that one
Please.
more time? It's not just what they're searching for?
it's not just what they're searching for, it's what and who is searching for them. Because the young brain especially is curious. And if you can build addiction young, you can own a person for life.
Mhm.
I'm not, you think, you're being really blunt. Yeah, I am. Because part of me is just really frustrated with what I feel like this mentality of, well, my kids are good kids. And I keep a pretty close eye on what they're doing on it. No, you don't.
Well, they must have the only good kids that I've ever
Yeah,
met.
exactly. No,
You don't remember their own youth.
Well,
you don't know what they're
ignorance
doing.
is bliss.
That's the thing. We want to be ignorant. And part of it's because if you get too close to parents, what they're doing with their phones isn't healthy.
Well, yeah, if we remember our own youth, how can we have this blinder on?
We had the same desires when we were kids.
Yeah.
We just didn't have the access.
Well, I think they also think it's better to them because it's like, okay, if my kids' options are they can be going out and doing drugs and do terrible things, or they're just on TikTok, I'll take TikTok. That seems good.
Until you realize that the
Yeah,
TikTok
it's just as
For
bad.
You feed is going to lead them to that.
Yeah.
Right?
So,
And not have
but
some
at least in
information
their
on it.
mind, I think that's maybe the justification.
That's because,
they agree.
and I love that Paul spelled TikTok TICTOC, which is
He's not really.
not
It's
how
T-O-K.
it's spelled.
It's T-O-T-I-C-T-O-K.
I've never.
Which
is what-
made
when you
me
said-
smile.
I don't know anything
Like,
about
I love
TikTok.
you. You don't
It's like,
even,
yeah,
I mean,
it's
but that's the
spelled
thing.
wrong, so.
We don't know how to spell the things these kids are on, let alone what they're seeing on there, okay? But I mentioned this, I'm not going to go into great detail on here, other than screens in schools. Okay. You have to know that administrative passwords are traded like currency. Kids find the passwords, they trade them and sell them to the network in the school. All it takes is one kid with a cell phone hotspot access. All right? The distractions from screens. I mean, they've actually done a study on this, where they, in a larger classroom where you have like the tiered seats, front row, no screens whatsoever. Middle row, laptops, screens. Back row, no screens. What did they discover? Who had the best retention? Front row, no screens. Who had the worst? Middle row. But you would think the back row, well, they don't have screens, so surely they can focus. What do you think they were distracted by?
The people
Screens in the
The
middle row.
people in the middle, the screens in the middle. It's like secondhand smoke, is what it is. The distractions are overwhelming.
Can I
Please,
just
please.
say that adults are just as bad with
Yes.
this because at meetings,
Uh-huh.
We're worse.
yeah,
Go to a pastor's conference and sit in the back. They're all searching their emails.
yeah, or checking something out online.
They're on
It's-
Facebook.
Yeah.
That's it, because the temptation is so strong. Because what's happening, and we think we can multitask, which is the next thing I'm going to talk about, which is a myth. It is a myth. But we think we can, and what's going on up front really isn't that interesting. But by golly, there's the hope of something new with every click or every swipe up, and that feels good. So there's the dopamine, get more, get more, get more, or the I can get more done and multitask. No, actually not. Many believe that multitasking actually helps kids, right? That they can be on the TV, they can text, they can listen to music with words, and they can do their homework all at the same time, and that's how they learn. That's false. It's false. Multitasking. Actually, they did MRI studies on impact of multitasking on people's ability to learn. What they discovered is multitaskers actually use a different region of the brain when compared to focused subjects. So the focused learners use the hippocampus, the region of the brain known for creating these deep, lasting memories and learning. The multitasking learner uses regions more closely associated with the automatic system. So one researcher says, actually in the screen school, even if you learn while multitasking, the learning is less flexible and more specialized, so you cannot retrieve the information easily. And learn this. There are forms of multitasking. Like, for example, I put the clothes in the washing machine and then I go over here and wash the dishes. I'm accomplishing two things at the same time, right? Or like this morning, I hit print on the packet you have in front of you, and then I went over and 3-hole punched when I wanted to put in here. So while that was printing, I was going to go do this. That's multitasking, okay? What we do most of the time is multi-switching or attention switching. That's what's actually happening. So you really can't focus on both stimuli at the same time. You can't. We switch our attention back and forth from one to the other. And it's actually a very inefficient mode of mental processing. So it doesn't save time, and it actually increases the time it takes to complete an individual task. So we did this in our family discipling event, and I don't have time to do it today, but just to kind of prove the point, I had a couple kids, here was the task. Take a piece of paper and get your pencil, and in one column, you're going to write, so we're going to number from 1 to 26 and A through Z, but we're going to do 1A, 2B, 3C, all the way through the alphabet. You're multitasking, multi-switching. You're going to do those two at the same time, and we'll time you. And then we're going to time you writing 1 through 26, A through Z. So doing this task and then this task, and see which is faster. Any guesses?
They slowed down with the individual
Yeah,
until you were
going
right on the
back and forth, back and forth, back and forth. It was far less efficient. They were much faster doing the first task than the second task. Now, you kind of take that into your life, and you can see where this goes. So people who multitask are the most likely to be impulsive, sensation-seeking, and actually overconfident in their multitasking abilities. And they tend to be less capable of multitasking. So what we're actually doing when we're multitasking...
Could you just list those again?
Yeah, sure.
Impulsive,
Yeah.
sensation-seeking.
So they tend to be impulsive, sensation-seeking, overconfident of their multitasking abilities, and they tend to be actually less capable of multitasking. So don't do this at home. But if you can imagine the scene, your wife is talking to you and you are texting. And you think you're listening to your wife. And I can do both at the same time. What's going to happen later is she's going to say, well, why didn't you do such and such? And you say, what are you talking about? And she says, I told you. What? So what's actually happening is you've put her on background. And if something like she says, fire, then you go, oh, I should pay attention to this. But she's on background, and you're paying attention to this. And you think you're multitasking. You're not. You're attention switching. And you can really only give your attention to one thing at a time. And you think you can give it to both, you won't. You actually give less to each. So we think, well, our kids, they can multitask. No, they can't. We say, oh, they have so much homework, it takes so long. Oh, no, they actually don't. The problem is they've got their phone with them, and they've been interrupted 36 times. They have their music on with words, and they're distracted by that. And then there are multiple screens all around them distracting them. So it's digital distraction masquerading as multitasking. And actually, Screen School talks about this. Chronic multitaskers actually experience brain atrophy. It shrinks their brain. So this is the last line here. He says in the Screen School, we expect children to learn in the land of distraction. We are not helping them. We're surrounding them with things that distract. We get distracted by this stuff. We're surrounding them by things that distract them, expecting them to focus. Especially with a young brain, it's really hard. Because the executive function, impulse control, these sorts of things, these things aren't mature yet. And we're not giving them the tools to learn how to mature in this way. I mentioned engagement earlier. Okay, clicks, shares, retweets, Eyeballs, eyeballs, eyeballs. It's about monetization, okay? And I also mentioned that they know this, but this is all about algorithms, okay? The algorithms are about maximizing engagement, more eyes watching the screen for more time. I think the video is called Social Dilemma. Actually, yeah. Netflix produced it. You can find it online. It's pretty eye-opening.
Yeah.
Social Dilemma. So the point is, the producers can say, we guarantee this many eyeballs will see your ad for this long, right? And here's what we know. Extreme content attracts eyeballs. It does. Nuanced, careful, thoughtful writing and reporting doesn't get eyeballs. Material that tries to be fair and charitable, that doesn't get eyeballs. Extreme, simplistic, non-thoughtful, divisive content, that gets eyeballs. And that content escalates the blood pressure, and that drives the feeling of urgency. That turns us all into these chicken littles panicking that the sky is falling, and that drives engagement. And that attracts advertisers. And that brings money. And that brings power. So I need you to understand, they don't view you as a person. Okay? What do they call people who use phones and tablets and computers? They call them users. You're a user. Who else is called a user?
People in Trump.
What's that?
People in Trump.
I was thinking Trump when he said user. I was like,
Okay,
users.
I'm thinking more drugs, addicts,
Alcohol.
name it, any substance. That's a user, okay? The drug dealer knows that the more addictive their drug, the more promising their drug, the more powerful the addiction, the easier it is to manipulate people.
And it's all about money.
Money, money, money. It's monetized. They use engagement. That's a very positive sounding word. We all like the word engagement. But think of it this way. It's about owning your eyeballs. It's about controlling your imagination. And it's about having your desire button pushed over and over. Ring that bell, get you to drool, get you to want what they're going to put up next. Arts. The question is, how are screens affecting us? And you may not be able to see from the back, maybe. This is U.S. smartphone ownership. So as of 2021, 85% of the U.S. population owns smartphones. That's just it's a baseline to know kind of what we're talking about. Here, you can see this only goes 2018, no, age in years, I take that back. This goes up to 2019. So from 15 to 19, you can see the trend line, the greenish one on the bottom, starting at age 8, back in 2015, 11% of 8-year-olds had smartphones. Now that's 19% have smartphones starting at age 8, going up to age 18 with 91% currently, which used to be 77. The point is the trend line continues to go up, please.
So that's phones, not tablets.
Just smartphones. Yep.
Because I'd imagine if that was tablets, it'd be
It'd
like
be even higher, right?
kids are probably at 50 to 60. I mean,
Oh,
the
the
amount of
young
people
ones.
we know.
Oh, the little ones have tablets way
Yeah,
before.
little like.
Yeah.
I mean,
Yeah.
they all have them.
Yeah. So I just want you to see that and keep that in the back of your mind when we get to some of the mental health things we're going to talk about. And I just want you to see the trend line of the number of people who have these things, so who they are accessible to the internet, social media, and so forth. They are being targeted. So how is it affecting us? We alluded to this earlier. Ask yourself, do you think the multiplication of screens strengthens the family bond? Many people think so, but research shows precisely the opposite. Multiple screens means fractured family. Here's why. If we're all one big family, we're all now looking at one screen. So over lunch, let's say you're going to talk about the screens that you saw. You've all seen the same screen. You've all shared the same experience. If, however, we're in this room and we spent the last hour all individually watching our screen something separate, what shared experience have you had? Well, you were physically in the same room. You felt the same temperature, but you didn't share any experience realistically in any meaningful way. This is happening in families, where families now are fragmented because they are watching different things on their screens and they're not having a shared family experience. They also don't develop family stories, like shared stories as a family. I'll give you maybe what's a neologism for you, a new word. It's called familect, your family dialect.
That's a fun word.
It's a fun word.
Can you spell that?
Yes, just Familect, familect. All of you who have families, you have familects. You have jokes that only make sense in your family. If you were to say them here, it would be like, you're weird. It wouldn't make sense. Those family jokes, those family sayings, those family stories, they don't communicate outside your family. And that's good because these are the cohesive glue that holds a family together. And we have these shared stories and shared familect. It's also interesting if you were to convert this over to, let's say, a worshiping community who has a shared familect of sorts in our liturgy. Right? A church elect, whatever you want to call it.
Lutheranese.
What's that?
Lutheranese.
Okay, let's call it, but I like church elect. In other words, it's a shared language, okay? And that is a cohesive bond. Something really important happens there. But when we totally fragment in terms of giving everybody their own screen, we break that up. And that is very damaging to families. American Academy of Pediatrics, Dr. Ari Brown does some research and says that screen time reduces talk time between parent and child by 85% when the screen is on. So if the screen is on, talk time is reduced by 85%. That's a big drop. Talk time is so important in families. Talk time is so critical for so many things. But when the screen comes out, talk time goes away. And it fragments families. And do you think this affects our schools? Shake your head, yes. Do you think it affects our churches? Shake your head, yes. Do you think it affects our communities? Just keep your bobblehead going. Yes, it does. Okay? Because we don't have any shared experiences. Because we're all fragmented. It distorts our sense of reality. So on social media, we see highly edited snapshots of dozens of different lives, and we patch them together in our mind into this idealized movie of success and happiness, which, guess what? We don't have. We feel empty, we feel disappointed, we feel depressed. We do this. We piece together this idealized family that's out there because we saw 46 different snapshots or quick little happy videos of everyone just so happy, and we don't have that. My life doesn't look like that. Neither does theirs. It's been highly edited. Yes.
I keep thinking about this, and when you just said this, it's kind of put two pieces together. But over the last 4 years, I have felt like sometimes when you talk to someone, or are you listening to someone talk from a video or in person, you feel like you're talking to someone who hasn't been living in the same world as you. And I feel like, especially at least in political discussions, people are accusing the other side of doing the exact same thing. The best example is how in politics it's those people are Nazis.
Yeah.
And how they are they're fascists and they're Nazis, and they're both accusing each other of the exact same thing. And it's it feels like you guys aren't even living in the same reality.
They're not.
And I wonder if that has mostly to do with when you're on the internet so much, your sense of what the real world is like is now being so distorted that when you talk to another person, you're not even in the same world. So words don't mean the same things. You're not experiencing even the same reality as the other person.
Exactly.
And you can't even talk to each other because you're we're not even in the same
You're
ballpark.
exactly right. Now,
it's very frustrating.
you see that happening on a cultural, political level. It's happening in the home.
Even
it's happening
amongst each
in
other.
the home, right? So yes, and this is contributing to it. Please, someone else have a thought? Okay, one other thing to think about. This may make your brain hurt a little bit, but I'm okay with that. So, screens affect the way we tell truth. So I love this. This painting is always fascinating me. It's a Vermeer from the 1600s. And it's got a really creative name. It's like a girl with a pearl earring. But, and if you study it more, it's very fascinating, some of the questions it raises. But my question for you is the image true? Can you understand the question? No, because you don't ask the question, is the image true? Truth is not, as opposed to, is this an edited image? That's not what I'm asking. Okay, I'm asking, this category is one we struggle to ask with images. Because images basically teach us to think in feelings. It doesn't teach us to think in categories of true and false. Music has the same potential to enter the brain through a different door than the one labeled truth. This is why you will sing certain songs on the radio that you would never just read the lyrics out loud in front of a mixed group.
Oh.
Understand what I'm saying? So some of you, if you go back to the songs you grew up on that you love to kind of rock out to, if you were to stand in front of your congregation and just read the lyrics, you probably would leave red-faced because the lyrics are not good. But the music is so catchy. This is why like Bethel and Hillsong's music is so popular, because it's so catchy, but it smuggles in a false theology. Okay, so it enters the door. The power of images and music is it enters the door through the mind through the door labeled aesthetics or feelings or experience and so forth, but it doesn't actually engage the part that says, is this true? So I just want you to see images change the way we tell truth. And I don't think it's an exaggeration to say that our social media world is primarily an image-based world. Okay? I'm not demonizing images. I'm saying they change the way we tell truth. We need to be aware of that. So how are screens affecting us? Maybe you remember Marshall McLuhan or maybe Neil Postman who followed him up. But the medium is the message. This is really insightful. I mean, it's really insightful. The medium affects the message. It changes the way truth is told. I highly recommend Neil Postman. I don't think I put it on this, it's not on their resource list, but Neil Postman's Amusing Ourselves to Death. It's been around for 30 years now. Okay, it's dated now, but it's incredibly prescient as a book is before internet even, and the stuff he's seen before that, really remarkable. But what I want to do though is walk through a few different mediums through which truth is being told today and ask what the medium itself, not the content that like the TV program or the internet post, but the medium itself, what is it saying about truth? What's it saying about reality? Because it's saying something about reality. And the question I want us to learn to ask is that how reality really is? Okay, how is the medium affecting this? So take TV. I didn't put this in your resource list either. A great little book. My wife read the whole thing. I've read snippets of it. It's called Stolen Focus by Johann Hari, H-A-R-I. Stolen Focus is the name of the book. But he says, TV teaches you that the world is fast, that it's about surfaces and appearances, that everything in the world is happening at once. This is the message of TV. Neil Postman actually called this a now this world. So you can watch the news on the earthquake that happened in Syria and Turkey, and then you get, that lasts for 90 seconds at most. Now you have this freakish plastic-headed Burger King trying to get you to eat his burgers. Now LeBron James is the new scoring champion. Yeah. Now there's a balloon over South Carolina that's being shot down, So everything is a now this. And so logical progression and connection on TV, that's out. Okay, it's just, that's not a part of the medium. And it's all right now. Does that match up with reality? Is that how the world really is? Does everything happen right now? And does it not matter if things are logically connected at all? Is that how you live your world when you're trying to function? When you have a conversation with your spouse, are you able to have a meaningful conversation if you do that? No, that's not how reality is. So the medium itself affects the way truth is told. Take Twitter. Twitter says, you shouldn't focus on any one thing for very long. The world should be interpreted and confidently understood very quickly. And what matters more is whether people immediately agree with and applaud your short, simple, speedy statement. Okay, shouldn't focus on anything for very long. The world needs to be interpreted and confidently understood very quickly. And what matters more is whether people immediately agree with and applaud your short, simple, speedy statement. Is this true? Is that true? Is that the way reality is? In other words, is that a healthy or wise way to process reality to move through the world? Okay? Don't think about anything for very long. Deep reflection is out. If you don't want to spend any time reflecting on things, that would be bad. And you need to understand things in 144 characters or fewer, or whatever their limit is now. You will have an example in Scripture of the Proverbs that may be the equivalent of Twitter in Scripture. But what has happened before those Proverbs were shared is what? A lot of thinking. Twitter says, don't spend any time thinking. You need to be able to confidently express the truth about reality in this short snippet, and it's really important not whether it's true, but whether it gets retweeted. That's the message of the medium. Do you think that messes with truth? I think it does. Take Facebook. Your life exists to be displayed to other people, and you should be aiming every day to show your friends edited highlights of your life. Okay, your life is to be displayed, and you need to put your edited highlights out there. And what matters is whether people immediately like these edited and carefully selected highlights that you spend your life creating, and somebody is your friend if you regularly look at their edited highlight reels and they look at yours. That's what friendship means. I'll edit my life, put it out there for you. You edit your life, put it out there, and we'll look at it. And that makes us friends. Is that true? Is that what a friend is? Does that match up with reality? Is that a healthy way to process reality, to move through the world? I don't think so. Take Instagram. What matters is how you look on the outside. 2, what matters is how you look on the outside. 3, what matters is how you look on the outside. 4, what matters is whether people like how you look on the outside. That's the message of Instagram. Is that true? Is that the way reality is? Is that a healthy way to process reality? That's what this medium is teaching us about reality. Now, what about books? What do books say? Well, life is complex. If you want to understand it, you're going to have to set aside a fair bit of time, and you're going to think deeply about it. There is value in leaving behind your other concerns and narrowing down your attention to one thing, sentence after sentence, page after page. And it's worth thinking deeply about how other people live and how their minds work. I think of Psalm 1, right? His delight is in the law of the Lord, and on his law he meditates day and night. Right? Reflection, thought, time, meditating. So much of our scriptures, it's meditation literature. It's not meant to be read once and like, I read that book. It's meant to be meditated on and wrestled with and thought about for a lifetime. Is that a different way of telling truth than what our mediums today are doing? It's pretty drastically different, isn't it? It's drastically different. This was on the cover of the New Yorker several years ago now. I add the title Incurvatus in se. We are curved inward upon ourselves. And I think that's a pretty good image of what our culture looks like in terms of our turned inwardness. We're just bent inward on our phones. Here's what we know. Large screening studies of U.S. samples of adolescents and young adults since 2010 Now, if we were to go back, and I'll show this, I think I have a couple slides of this in a second, but just keep in mind the trend line on smartphones, okay, when they started to become ubiquitous. But since 2010, these studies have shown declines in happiness, life satisfaction, and flourishing, increases in loneliness, anxiety, depressive symptoms, major depressive episodes within the last year, hospital admissions for self-harm behaviors, that's non-suicidal behaviors, suicide ideation, self-harm and suicide attempts via poisoning, suicide attempts just in general, self-reported suicide ideation. All these things have gone up precipitously. That's concerning. So, what do we notice? This just says more likely to feel lonely. This was a study with 8th, 10th, and 12th graders. And the iPhone was released in 2007. So they often feel left out, often feel lonely. You can see a precipitous incline right about the time the iPhone was released. It may be hard to see at the bottom, I'll tell you what it says. The red line is how social media use and depression are affecting girls. The green line would be how they're affecting boys, and the other one is just when you put them two together. So, and then as going across the bottom, the time online. So for boys, after about half an hour, their depression levels immediately go down because there's this great dopamine hit and it's very pleasurable. But prolonged time, their levels of depressive symptoms and so forth, or their well-being gets worse. Okay, with more time online, we see increase in unhappiness. Let's just put it that way. As we spend more time online, in fact, what we're going to see is just to make this easy. Every metric of human well-being, happiness, wholeness, contentedness, every measure of human well-being gets worse the longer we spend in front of our screen. And I would say if you really like charts and graphs and everything, either read Twangy's book or just Google her name. She's got, if you like TED Talks, she'll give you a TED Talk. Okay, so she's one of the main researchers in the field. All right, so if you like charts, like I just can't get enough charts, well, she'll give you more charts. This is percent of teens with major depressive episodes in the last 12 months. And you can see right about 2007, 8, 9, we start to see those trend lines start to go up. And you could basically map onto that cell phone ownership among teens matches the trend line. So again, I'm not saying necessarily that it causes this. That would not be a conclusion that you could make definitively, but the researchers are saying that this seems to be a likely candidate for what's happening. Suicide rate, you can see right about 2007, iPhone introduced. The suicide rate for 13 to 18-year-olds in the US begins to go up precipitously. This is just a chart talking about depressive symptoms among teenagers. And I know it's really small, but you can see there 2007 is iPhone introduced. 2012 is when ownership begins to be pretty ubiquitous across the board. And you can see an increase of depressive symptoms. I think those are suggestive. This is talking about sleep and the impact of screens on our sleep. And man, the more you learn about this, the more upsetting this is. I have a few videos, I'm not going to have time to show those. You can just Google, you go to YouTube and find these videos, they're hard to do. But researchers found that sleep provides a time when the brain's synapses, so the connections among our neurons, actually there's a shrinkage that happens. This is actually a good thing though. During this time, the synapses rest and they prepare for the next day, when they will grow stronger when they receive new input. So they're going to learn new things then, all right? So that's really important. But without this reset known as, okay, big word, synaptic homeostasis, synapses can become overloaded and burned out, kind of like an electric outlet with too many appliances plugged into it. It's critical then to have this pruning back at night. So the huge amount of information that's encoded by temporary synapses during the day will overwhelm the brain. So it's basically the brain's way of moving temporary stuff into long-term storage. And we need that sleep time to give our brains the time to do this function. There's a critical function happening in your brain overnight. Now, it may be hard to see on the screen exactly, but what this shows us is the percentage of US parents and teenagers who use their mobile device within how many minutes before bed. And I want to see the middle one there. At least 30%, 36% of teens are using their phone at least once during the night. If they have their phones in their bedrooms, chances are they will receive texts and notifications during the night. And this will interrupt their sleep. And sleep is so important to the young brain. It's so important to our brain, but especially to the developing brain. I could spend a long time on this, and this is just a quick chart to talk about some of this, and I'm not going to go into all of it, but it's necessary for brain development as well as for emotional and physical health. It improves focus, motivation, memory, learning, emotional regulation. During sleep, all the learning from the day is consolidated into the long-term memory center of the brain. During sleep is also when the toxins are removed from the brain. So the cerebral spinal fluid washes in and out of the brain during sleep. So it clears out the waste. And you can find this in the Screen Strong course. But what happens in sleep is so important. And there is great wisdom in trying to separate yourself from the screen in advance of sleep. Some will say 45 minutes, some will say an hour at least between screen time and sleep time, especially for young people. This is important. I know it's not always possible. But one thing I would say is get all screens out of bedrooms. All of them. Out of bedrooms. Bedrooms are for sleeping, and you need the sleep. Your body, your brain needs the sleep. If you've got kids or grandkids, no screens in their room. None. What about homework? Okay, you set up your own rules and regulations to govern that. I get it, and you get to make up how that's going to work. But let's not be naive about screens. And kids who are addicted, they will go to great lengths to get those screens in their bedrooms. They will lie to you. I've got a kid at the church who 2 times, his parents have been working with him, who 2 times he's secretly got a separate phone that they didn't know about. Twice he's got a separate phone that they didn't know about. And they find ways, this stuff is powerful. So, and it's not just what they're doing, it's the fact that they're not sleeping and how this affects the brain. And a lot of these kids in school, they are sleep-deprived kids. And look, everybody here is old enough to know what it feels like not to have sleep. How does your day go? How kind of a person are you? You know, think about your relationships. How well do those go when you're sleep-deprived? They are not great. They are not, and young people simply aren't equipped to be able to do this. They can't think, they can't focus. If I had time, I would show you a video, but I'm pretty sure I can't because I'm not connected to the internet, so I'm going to skip over it anyway. But let's just say there's no evidence that screens help us sleep at all. At all. Okay? This I want to share with you. This is Reed Hastings. He's the CEO of Netflix. He says, you think about it, when you watch a show from Netflix and you get addicted to it, you stay up late at night. We are competing with sleep on the margin. So it's a very large pool of time. What he's saying is, our main competitor is sleep. So what we need to do is to cut into our competitor's time and find a way to keep eyeballs watching and less sleep. Sleep's their biggest competitor. How are screens affecting us? They are stealing our sleep. And you may think you can function on 4 hours of sleep. There are percentage-wise low single digits of adults who can actually function well on low sleep. So maybe you're the 2%, maybe. But for most of us, I know I'm not. I know. But for me, 7 hours. If I don't get more than 7 hours, less than that, I can tell it affects me. So like, I have a hard rule. This is when I go to sleep. This is when I get up. This is sleep time, right? That's very important because I need to function. This is a real thing, okay? Self-harm and the discovery of the ideas and how to self-harm and how to hide it have been terribly exacerbated online. So 2018, there's research on this. More than 1.2 million teens participated in, teen posts were identified on Instagram accompanied by one of 3 hashtags. So these are teen posts, 1.2 million teen posts, hashtag cutting and self-harm. Okay, those are the 2. The other one is self-harm spelled a little differently. But self-harm is closely identified and linked with depression and mental distress. And this hashtag was also one of the most associated with suicide, hashtag hate myself. You have all kinds of influencers online showing kids how to cut themselves, how to hurt themselves, how to hide it. So, and they are viewed with a disturbing regularity. I mean, millions of views. So I think that's something we should be concerned about. And don't ever think, well, my kid wouldn't, or my kids in my church wouldn't. That's naive. Screens destroy imagination. So Screen School puts it this way. Because technological forms of play typically require no imagination, the portion of the brain children use for it become underutilized. And as a result, they don't fully develop. It's these forms of early play that can create imagination, which can lead to creativity later in life. Lacking in creative thinking can likely lead to difficulty with outside-the-box thinking, which is essential for problem solving. Then they say, this is so insightful. We talked earlier about sending your kids outside, okay? Or even inside, but just without screens. Screens, they tell them what to imagine. They do all the imagining for them. And it's fine to be entertained. I'm not saying you should never have screens in front of your kids, never have screens, but we need to have them far more limited than what we do. So they write here, rather than play in a world constructed by their own minds, worlds in which they're cops and robbers, doctors and patients, princesses and aliens, or whatever they'd like to be, kids today play mostly in worlds created by others in the form of video games or other media content. Make-believe is a mentally rigorous exercise that helps a child develop critical thought and creativity. But kids are systematically replacing their important form of play with games created by the minds of others. Imagination is important for kids. And when we put screens in front of them, it will hypnotize them. It will make them quiet. It works. I've done it with my own kids. Like, here, watch this. I mean, they are comatose, hypnotized. You can keep your kids quiet and get whatever done you want in the house. It's the easiest babysitter in the world. It works. But you are basically saying to them, I am going to steal your imagination and let someone else do it for you. Imagination is loud and messy, but it's necessary for our kids, and we steal that from them. We talked briefly about this, and Mick, we visited about this, but like Mick's presentation would be here, right? And of course you click on it and open up, his whole presentation. But what we're saying is this, what he presents is one subset of this huge conversation. Every porn star has a Disney equivalent. So they will use a Disney character, and yeah, how about that for walking in? So
Yeah, that was a weird comment.
my point is, they Google Snow White. There's a porn star equivalent. That's not accidental. Every porn star has a Pinterest, Instagram, and TikTok page. Video games are adding sexually explicit and suggestive material. I talked about some of that. Okay, TikTok's For You feed funnels recommendations, even information on accessing outside links where they can access this. This also affects the way young people date and their expectations for dates. The expectations for nudes today is huge. I just was at a presentation last week at our school, and we had Roger Saylor. He's the district judge for our district in this area, and he gave a presentation on the law and sex. What's legal? Now, he said, I'm not talking about what's moral. I'm just saying who goes to jail for what, okay? Many of these kids sending nudes, that's child pornography. If they're under 18, it's child pornography. You're going to land on the sex registry. If they distribute this, it just piles up very, very quickly. It's illegal in Iowa to distribute child pornography. Good, it should be. But kids don't realize this. But the pressure for nudes is huge. It is an expectation. They watch and learn what they think sex should look like. Now, it's all fake. You've done the research. This is all fake. It's all a lie. But the kids don't know that. They don't know that. Now, this is so important to understand. Wall Street Journal exposed this a while back. They did they set up these bots, B-O-T, automated accounts with TikTok. Did this with Facebook too. And they registered them to a 13-year-old user. So they claimed a bot that's 13. And basically, the bot is going to use TikTok and see what TikTok recommends to a known 13-year-old. Okay, so TikTok begins the For You feed, and the number of drug paraphernalia specific sites that were eventually recommended and pornographic sites that were eventually recommended to what TikTok knew was a 13-year-old. Wall Street Journal does this whole expose on exposing this. This is where TikTok leads. This is the material it takes you to. You know, and Paul, you made a reference to the kids, they know this. The kids know this. Do parents know this? I mean, would you drop your kid off in a community where you knew at the end of this block, you know, you keep going 3 more blocks and that's the red light district, but you know what? You go anywhere you want, I'm sure you'll make good decisions. No, of course you wouldn't. So, what should we do? Screen limits. And now, this is where the battle's fought, and I get it's a battle. I'm not going to tell you there's one right way to do it. But if it were me, there'd be no social media for my kids. Oh, I'm a psycho dad. I get it. I'm a psycho dad. I am. I mean, my kids have heard Dad say multiple times, I got 2 things I want to say to you. They go, I know, Dad. No social media and don't live with your girlfriend. Right. Okay, good. You got those 2 things. That's 2 things I want you to know. No social media, none. When they're 18, they can make, they're more mature to be able to make that decision. Okay, but and in my house, no online gaming. I'm a mean dad. Do we have little tablets that have some program games on it that don't allow them to access the internet? Yeah, we do. There's no internet connection. That's very limited. This is a rare thing. So like we don't have that. No phones, tablets in the bedroom. Okay, no. Now, parents get to decide what battles they want to fight, but it is a battle. Your kids will hound you. They will do everything in their power to wear you down. It's just a battle we have to fight. We need to work on executive function issues, okay? This is basically interaction in the unpixelated 3D world. Like we have to learn how to, like making the bed, setting a schedule, being on time, packing our school bag the night before, right? doing our homework at the same spot every day. These are very helpful for executive function. This is the governor of your brain that helps you to planning, decision making, problem solving, action sequencing, task organization, goal pursuit, and the inhibition of the of competing impulses. So I could say, no, I'm going to resist that. These involve language and judgment and abstract thinking and concept formation and logic and reasoning. This is all stuff that happens in the 3D world. It's not stuff that's really emphasized in the digital world. It's not the way that world is designed. Because that stuff's hard. If social media did that stuff, it made it hard, people wouldn't do it. Remember, it's designed to be brain dead easy. That's what it's designed for. That's what it's aiming after. Okay? So, we need to really focus on developing executive function. And if you can just Google executive function, you can find lots of different ways to develop this. But this is about how to move through the 3D world, control our impulses, be patient, adjust solutions when necessary, when we're problem solving, remember instructions, set goals, monitor our progress, make plans and decisions, stay on task, being on time and organized. All the stuff that may not be fun right now, but all the stuff that will free you to thrive in life. And if you don't develop it, you develop a very stunted life. These are very simple things, but they're simple to say. Look, these are natural dopamine boosters. And I'm not going to go into great detail, but there are actually healthy food's a whole nother, like we can open a slide here for our food options and how we get nutrition in our world.
That's bacon on top, right?
Yeah, exactly right. That's bacon up. You got that right. I know the images aren't great, but I mean, so in other words, protein rich. Yeah, it's not. It's what he's pretending it is. It's protein rich foods, less saturated fat. These sorts of things. Exercise. I know nobody likes exercise, but this is an important thing. There's actually a dopamine boost you can get from this.
Runner's high.
What's that?
The runner's high.
It is. There is something to this.
Line where Angela says, like, I hate drugs so much. She's like, I even started running and I started getting a runner's high, so that's why I lift weights now.
Yeah, there you go. Right. Adequate sleep. We talked about this, right? That's important. Sunlight is important. This is just life in the 3D world. Okay, and some of this is just, it's like, how do you communicate this to people? But
why do you need to communicate it is really the puzzling thing. It seems so obvious.
It does, but the problem is we need to avoid the easy button. That's basically what I'm coming down to. The easy button is easy for a reason, right? It doesn't help. Now, this book also, this is really important, okay? Atomic Habits. No, it's not written from a Christian perspective. I would say the complement is this one, You Are What You Love by James Smith. So subtitle, The Spiritual Power of Habit. You read it? Excellent stuff, okay? And this is a whole other slide I can open up to a whole new world of the importance of our spiritual habits. And honestly, if you get the value of habits, you can see immediately how this applies to our life as Christians, okay? But this one, I so appreciate, and the basic message is, you habit your way into new thinking. You habit your way into new thinking.
Not the other way around.
Not the other way around. Not the other way around. You habit your way into new thinking. Anything that seems strange, but there's so much truth to it. Change your habits, change your life, right? The neurons that fire together, wire together. All different ways you can say this. But habits function like compound interest, and the benefits accrue over time. Let me read a couple quotes, and I have a whole, on the resource list, the articles on the bottom, those are all articles I've written. Most of them are available on my church's webpage under the blog tab. Some of them aren't. If they're not there, ask me, I'll email them to you. But I have several there on habits that are really, I found profound.
And I tried to put one at each of your spots, but if I missed you, the extras are up here.
Extra there, so you can get them. So he says, your outcomes, this is James Clear in Atomic Habits. Your outcomes are a lagging measure of your habits. Your net worth is a lagging measure of your financial habits. Your weight is a lagging measure of your eating habits. Your knowledge is a lagging measure of your learning habits. Your clutter is a lagging measure of your cleaning habits. You get what you repeat. Okay? If you want to predict where you will end up in life, all you have to do is follow the curve of tiny gains or losses and see how your daily choices will compound 10 or 20 years down the line. Just ask yourself, just imagine an airplane, make it easier. If they change course by 1%, that will not get them to the airport that they were originally aiming for. You just give enough 10 years down the road, or 100 miles down the road, whatever, that 1%, that 2%, that makes a difference. So, what he points out, and he's spot on, and you can preach this if you want something to preach. You are not your intentions. You are your habits. It may be hard to hear, but that's the truth. He says you should be far more concerned with your current trajectory than with your current results. This is important. So instead of focusing on ambitious goals, we need to focus on the habits we're fostering day in and day out, the simple repeated choices that we're making every day. So don't focus on your goals. Everybody wants to make goals. Goals are fine, but instead focus on your trajectory. So he calls these your systems, and I love this. Goals are about the results you want to achieve. Systems are about the processes that lead to those results. So it's not the goal you need to focus on, it's the system. It's the daily or regular habit that you will establish, that you will repeat over and over and over again. Okay? It's the simple daily routine. It's the trajectory that you will set for your life. It's the 5 minutes or 10 minutes you'll spend every day in Scripture. It's the weekly Bible study that you will attend. It's the additional 1% that you will save or give. It's the system. So, when we set up these lofty goals that we never achieve, then we feel constantly guilty, right? We haven't reached our goal. So we quit and we would despair. Go eat a donut, right? That's what we do. But if we learn to delight in the process, in the system, in the little daily choices that we're making, then we get to be happy all along. And then we'll basically end up at our goal. But all along the way, then that feeds this healthy, godly, disciplined choices. So I don't have a great word for this. I call it like a process joy. Like if you can find joy in the process of the living, of the doing, of the discipline, if you find joy in that, you'll stay with it. It will be the thing that will set your trajectory. So how can you establish these habits that you will delight in and not say, I'm going to lose 50 pounds. Great, that's fine. If you lose 50 pounds, wonderful. But instead of saying, I'm going to delight in the healthy choice of habit from day to day, and then maybe that's what happens. I can achieve that, but I'm not going to despair because I didn't reach it. I'm going to delight in the daily choices. And James Smith does this in his book on the spiritual choices we make. And it's so profound and so insightful. It's just the daily choices. And I've experienced this. The daily choices, like for me, it has been never fewer than 10,000 steps. That's my goal. And that's my joy. Like it's really fun for me I love walking. I love exercising. I love this. I take delight in the process. And I could go on with that. But the power of habits is really, really powerful. So learn the habits. I am glad, so what should we do still? That phone makers are starting to come out with teenage-friendly smartphones. What I mean by that is you can text on these, you can take pictures on these. There is no social media whatsoever on Pinwheel or Gab. It is, the system will not allow social media. Both are great. I like Pinwheel a lot because there is I forget what the term is, the parent figure owns the portal, and every communication that goes to the teen comes through the portal of the parent's phone. So the parent must approve anybody who's texting or communicating with their child. And that must go through the parent's phone before it reaches the child's phone. So they are aware of all conversations that are happening. You say, I need to respect my child's privacy. No, you don't. No, you don't. I need to trust my child. What are you smoking? Would you have trusted you when you were a kid? Probably not. No, they need to trust you. We've got that backwards. We don't trust kids. Not because they're evil, and we're all evil, but because they're immature. The trust goes the other way. These are designed for parents who want all the things that parents want from smartphones, to be able to connect with their kids, to be able to text with their kids, to be able to know where their kids are and so forth, all those good things. And what I see is pretty much no good coming from social media for our kids. That's out. And this allows parents to decide what apps are allowed on their kids' phones and what are not. Everything that happens on the kid phone has to be approved through parent phone. I like that. Yes, it will cost you more money because there's a monthly subscription that goes with it. So it'll cost you money. In my mind, we spend money on a lot of things. This is probably one that's worth spending on. If you need the phone for your kid, I would recommend.
So Gab and Pinwheel are a program onto the phone, or they are the phone itself?
No, they're the phone itself. So you buy a Pinwheel phone, you buy a Gab phone.
Oh,
Now,
you buy the phone. And
Have you
Yes.
purchased one?
I haven't. The next one I purchased for my kid will be this. We talk about this. These just started coming out. So I wish it would have come out a few years ago.
So you still pay for your line.
Yes. So you add a line. So you buy this phone. So you add it to Verizon. You pay the Verizon line. You pay Pinwheel. It's not a lot, but there's a monthly fee for owning their phone and using.
Owning the phone.
Yeah.
Okay, because I can
Yeah.
see so this one is $14.99 per month for one of the phones.
Right.
But then you're also gonna have to pay
You got to pay your Verizon
the
bill.
line on top
Right.
of it.
So they
But that's
don't.
pretty cheap for a phone.
It's
It's not
not-
that bad.
But I think that's a monthly service. Yeah. Yeah, I know, exactly. It gets expensive pretty fast. But you just have to ask yourself, what are you willing to invest
But if
in?
you were gonna pay for a phone on Verizon anyway,
Right.
it's cheaper to pay for this phone.
Well, the thing is, you have to buy the phone, and that's a monthly service. You're gonna pay that straight through, in addition to buying the phone. So it's $150 to buy the phone, and you still gotta pay that. So I'm not for sure. I've looked at it for a while.
Oh,
You see what I'm saying?
Okay.
You still gotta buy the phone. Buying the
So
phone
this
is
is
separate.
$330 for that phone plus $15.99.
Exactly.
$14.99.
So it's not
So that's
cheap, but it provides what you probably aren't going to be able to provide on your own on a smartphone. You think you can set up parental controls, good luck. Your kids are smarter than you. They are smarter than you. There are ways there, and I can tell you, there are lots of
No,
ways
I'm
to work
smarter
around
than my
this.
kids.
Smarter than the phone.
For now, your kids are young.
Yes. For now, I am.
Give them time. Okay,
Met Ryan?
what's that? Yeah, exactly. Okay. Here's what I want you to think about. Consider your living space. Okay? You got to think really hard about this. What's in the center?
The
Are,
carpet.
are we prioritizing three-dimensional interactions or two? Is the screen supreme? Here's my suggestion. Again, I'm not saying not to have a TV in your house, because there are plenty of bad stuff that you can see on your TV. Plenty of good and okay stuff. But this is a shared experience. If it's a screen we all are together with, that's more important. But my point is, make it hard to turn on. Unplug it. The mere act of having to plug the TV in is going to discourage you from doing that. Put it behind, like they have these mounts you can put on your wall where you pull a canvas down, like a world map, or you pull down a piece of art that hangs in front of your TV that blocks it. So you don't see it. So if you don't see it, you're less likely to turn it on. Put the remote in the other side of the house. The point is, make it hard. We did this we had a smaller TV that fit in a cabinet that was closed, and we realized after about a year or two, we hadn't turned it on. We thought, well, why the heck we got that big thing? And now my TV lives in our attic. If there's something we really want to watch, we go get it and bring it downstairs and plug it in and watch it. Now, don't get me wrong. We have a screen that, well, you don't have one here, like the one you pull out of the floor. And we have a projector. So if we want to watch something, we can hop on to Amazon and we can buy something and we'll watch it. Like we've been watching the series All Creatures Great and Small, which has been remade, which is wonderful, delightful. It's great. And so sometimes we'll have our movie night where we'll set up our screen and our projector and we will choose to watch this thing together. And when we're done, we put it all away. Get rid of the easy button, okay? Make it hard. Put books out, because I will tell you what will happen if there's no screen there. They will pick up a book and they'll read it. I can tell you from empirical evidence, with 6 kids, I've watched this happen. Make sure there are family games. Lots of them. Lots of family games. I can't tell you how many family games I have played. Some of them I love, some of them I hate. This one, Read Aloud Revival. If you have not checked this out, this is great stuff, okay? They bring on authors and illustrators all the time. They interview them, and they have a book of the month. Sometimes they're children's books, like for younger kids. Sometimes they're a little bit older for a little older kids. But Read Aloud Revival does some really great stuff. And read aloud to your kids. Read aloud to your family. This is so valuable. Read the Bible out loud to your family, okay? And tell your parents to do this. They don't have to understand everything. But the act of reading out loud. Read stories, read series, like the Green Ember series, or Captain James Bigglesworth from the World War I in time. This is a whole series of fighter pilot from the early times of aviation. It's all fiction, but it's wonderful. The Narnia series, the Little Britches series, the Vanderbeeker series. I mean, we don't know how many hundreds of books we've read as a family, and it all contributes to the Familect, because we all have these book references that we're always talking about that we've shared together as we read it out loud. This was in the Wall Street Journal here a while back in September. I know you can't see my highlighted text. I'll read it to you. Reading aloud is perhaps the most efficient and effective way to promote cognitive development while also imparting a host of social, emotional, and cultural benefits. So what they found is the making up for COVID learning loss, the fastest way they were able to do that in the schools is reading out loud to kids. Read out loud. How many times am I going to say this? Read out loud. Isn't it interesting that we read the scriptures out loud in church? Do you think when Paul said to Timothy, commit yourself to the public reading of scripture, he was a little ahead of his time? Like, he got something that's happening in the reading and hearing out loud. This is so valuable. I mentioned family games. Sleeping Queens, Rat-a-tat-cat, Life, Sorry, Rummikub, Mancala, Chess, Checkers, Goblet, Shut the Box, Exploding Kittens. I hate Exploding Kittens. Racco, Quirkle, Blockus, Clumsy Thieves, the Taco Cat Goat Cheese Pizza. Hate that game. I get beat every time at that game. But so valuable. Because, oh, you will hate it. It's wonderful. Continuing on the what we should do. And again, this is under the heading of three-dimensional world, right? Unpixelated, three-dimensional world, not the virtual, reality sort of thing. So we've talked about playing games. I can't tell you how important this is. The things that happen when you play games, with language, with problem solving, with learning to do emotional regulation, because kids aren't going to win every game, right? They're going to lose, and they're going to throw tantrums. They have to learn how to manipulate. Dad may throw a tantrum and I lose, right? And I have to learn how to control my emotions. There are all these sort of executive function things that we're doing in the games, in addition to sharing a family experience, in addition to building the Familect, in addition to building the family identity. Now, the problem is this will take your time. It is far easier to put a screen in front of them and go do the things you want to do. That is way easier. This will be harder. But the thing I want you to understand is that's what being an adult means. Like, you have to do the hard things. And the hard things actually bring greater rewards. So this seems so simple. Eat supper together. Now, lots of things happen at the supper table. Now, sometimes the conversation feels like the most inane thing in the world. Like, kids will talk about the stupidest things or argue about the stupidest things that drive me crazy. But think deeper for a second. Remember we talked earlier about the dopamine hit that happens with eating? 50% increase? Think about association, what's happening. If the family's gathering around the table, and we know that food, by and large, creates a pleasure shot, with whom is that being enjoyed? Yeah. With the family. What sort of positive associations are we making in this meal? Pleasure happens here with these people, right? I mean, you're kind of stacking the deck in your favor. Like, we're going to sit at this table, we're going to do something we all like doing. We're going to eat, right? And it creates these very pleasurable feelings, which is appropriate. And it creates a family bond. Now, it is fascinating that one of the centerpieces of the Christian faith is gathering around a meal, isn't it? Do you find that fascinating? There's something happening there where God gathers us around a meal, and in that meal in and of itself is just a foretaste of a greater meal to come, where this great pleasure of being in the presence of our family will continue. And this is all connected, right? It's really profound. So I get our lives are not always going to allow us to have a meal every night. That's not my point. I get that. Having said that, just like we structure our home, the physical structure of how we've set it up, we need to be very mindful of how we set up our family routines. This may mean limiting certain extracurricular activities for your kids. I know. You may have to be the weird parent who says, you know what, you're not going to be in every sport. I'm not anti-sports.
I am.
Okay, you can be anti-sports. But we worship sports as a culture. And my experience with parents who are in every different sport under the sun, they're never home together with their family. They are split trying to get to all this stuff. And I'm not saying these things, sports are good. They're appropriate places. But if this doesn't work, maybe it's breakfast. Okay? Maybe it's breakfast. Build some traditions with this. This is in our family, okay? This doesn't have to be for your family. Tradition, Sunday evening is homemade pizza.
Oh, we have a pizza night too.
Oh, pizza.
So much fun. Our kids love it.
So much fun. And if for whatever reason Sunday gets interrupted, we don't get our pizza, oh man, that's like the worst thing ever, right? So there's something that's happening is we're building tradition. Traditions are really important for family cohesiveness and family identity. And they don't have to be hugely ornate traditions. Like, we're just making pizza, right? This is not going to win any awards, you know. This is a homemade pizza. We share it together. It's a very pleasurable thing, and we celebrate that. So the eating together, but being very intentional about saying, how will I structure my life so that we can share meals together? And it can look different for different families. I'm not trying to force one mold on any family, but we need to think about this. We need to take family walks. I don't have time for that. You make time. Okay? It doesn't have to be every day. Maybe it's just once a week. But this is engaging. Like, so we'll oftentimes do, we take our walks and say, either it's your goal to bring back one piece of nature, or to come back with one observation that you saw that was either beautiful or interesting or exciting. So we want you to, when we come back, this is what we're going to talk about. So we'll talk about while we're walking, but sometimes, even on a family walk, sometimes you have kids who are way up ahead, and sometimes kids branch off over here and so forth. So family doesn't mean we all have to hold hands and walk in a lockstep. We're experiencing something, and when we come back, we're going to say, what did you see? What did you experience? We have we call it a nature nook in our house. And the nature nook basically is all the bones and skulls and feathers and rocks and sticks and things that we found on whether they're nature walks from our house, or, you know, like we take a family vacation, we're in the mountains, or we're at Lake Michigan, or we're somewhere, and we bring back what we have. Way more rocks than any family should ever be allowed to have. We went to Thunder Bay, Canada several years ago now, and they have, you can do amethyst picking, right? And so you have to get a permit to go down to the mine, but when they blast the mine, the chunks go off to the side, and you go alongside and pick and fill up your bucket with amethysts. So they're beautiful, right? It's really fun. And so you get your bucket, and everybody gets there. We have lots of amethysts in our house because we brought back those rocks. And those rocks tell a story, right? So this is important because nature or creation is good for the soul. It's really good for the soul. I know winter is harder, but there are mild enough days you can do it in the wintertime, all right? One of our crazy traditions is on Thanksgiving Eve, because the town turns their Christmas tree on in the town square. We march through the snow or through the cold up town and go see the lit up Christmas tree at night. Our flashlight walk, we call it. It's a tradition. Did we start it on purpose? No, we did it once. And the next year, like, well, that's what we do because we did it once. And then now it's a tradition.
It's very Lutheran of you.
We did it once. It's a tradition, right? So, yes. But those family walks, those family discovery things, and then there are times where it's like, hey, can my brother and I go off and do our family? Yeah, so that kind of feeds itself, and they're outside in creation and nature, and they learn to see things and see their world. And I read an article, actually a poem on this not too long ago. Learning to see your world for its own beauty. So there's this great phrase in our hymn, Now Rest Beneath Night's Shadow. It's talking about the stars in the sky. It says, now all the heavenly splendor. In beautiful starlight tenders to that effect. It ends like this. And we this marvel seeing forget our selfish being for joy of beauty not our own. The problem we have with these is the temptation is what started to happen in our culture is God's creation has simply become the backdrop for our selfie. And we've failed to appreciate it for its inherent worth and inherent beauty. And if Jesus were preaching today, I think he may call us to die to our selfie, as opposed to just die to ourselves. Again, selfies aren't all bad. I'm not saying you can never do a selfie, but I am saying there's something disordered. So C.S. Lewis writes, and I think it's The Abolition of Man. He has two characters, Gaius and Titius. And anyway, they're discussing this waterfall that they're seeing, and they're asking basically, is there beauty in the waterfall itself, or am I only saying something about myself when I say it's beautiful? And my argument would be that beauty has its own quality and essence that calls us beyond ourselves. And that's I have a whole other presentation I do on beauty and the power of beauty as an apologetic for Christianity. But beauty has the ability to call us to transcend ourselves, to forget ourselves, to see something bigger than us. And it's not about us per se. It has its own intrinsic worth. And beauty can do that. And so if you can inculcate that in kids on your nature walks, we do every year try to get up in the fall and go up to Yellowsmoke in Denison and enjoy that nature walk and come back with bags full of leaves and whatever nature we find. And so those are really, really important. It's more than just a walk. And like I said, having a nature station or a nature nook or whatever you want to call it in your house, look, it's going to make your house messy. It's going to warn you. Everything that I'm saying is going to make your life noisy. It's going to make your life messy. It's going to be cluttered. You're going to have to manage this stuff because they're going to bring back all these treasures of 3D stuff. And you're going to be mad at me because why would I have just a screen would make this so much easier? And it will. But I'm saying that in the long run, this is going to be a deeper, more meaningful engagement with the world than the screen will. I would say have our kids learn instruments. In fact, when they do brain scans, listening to music makes the brain light up like fireworks, and playing or learning music takes it to the next level. So what we see is an amazing array of complex neural connections that happen, and it strengthens everything in the brain. So it's not just learning an instrument, it actually strengthens multiple neural connections, which translate into all kinds of other forms of learning. What I see, though, fewer and fewer kids learn instruments today because it's hard. It's a hard thing. And our lives are too busy for practice. I'm not putting guilt trips on any of us. I'm just saying to do certain things, you have to structure your life in a certain way. And there are some things you have to say no to that aren't bad things per se, but to prioritize other things. You have to say no to some things. That may make you weird. So just be prepared to be weird. Because you have to think 3D and what are we doing to make a whole person, right? A person who, it's called human flourishing, right? If you wanted to use that term. But engage the three-dimensional world. So that's what I'm aiming after here. Aim for more than pixels, right? This is the modern day version of building your house on the sand. It's building your house on the pixels. And this is what I want to close with. I think this is a helpful image. This is the way I conceptualize it, the way I teach it. Maybe some of you can remember the spoke sliders on bicycle wheels. Okay, you are a spoke slider, and the church is the hub in the middle. And when those wheels are turning, if they're not going too fast, if they're turning, those spoke sliders will slide out, and then they will come back. And they will go out, and they will come back. The church needs to be the hub. And here's the thing I want us to wrestle with is you already have a hub. All of your people have a hub. Everyone has a hub around which they revolve. And they can be lots of things. They can be our job. But here's what I know about our job. And I know this to be true, even though sometimes I don't actually practice it very well in my mind. I will not always be the pastor of Zion Lutheran Church in Manning, Iowa. I know. I tell my secretary oftentimes I will either go out like this or like this. And she always says, well, I hope you go out like this. I said, do you want me dead? So I'm sure that's what she's saying. But at some point, I won't be physically able to do the job anymore if I live long enough. And if I've built my identity around this is my hub, is that I'm the pastor. And when I'm no longer the pastor, what does that mean for my identity? I experienced this last year when we sent our oldest off to college. I discovered something that many of you discovered long before me, and I was too young and naive to know the difference, is we wouldn't always be viewed as the family with 6 kids. Because now people who meet me see us and say, oh, you have 5 kids. Like, well, actually we have 6, one's not with us. They don't, and I thought, something changed about the way I identified. And I know that, well, he'll come home for summer or whatever. Eventually he's going to stop coming home.
And the other thing is he'll always be a guest now.
He's a guest.
Yeah.
He's a guest.
He doesn't live there.
He doesn't live there. Exactly right. I mean, his bed, which is still there, but is piled with all the other kids' stuff. Like they use it for storage now, right? So
Leaves and rocks and stuff.
exactly. Exactly. Even those things. I mean, so my question is, what hub in your life is strong enough and permanent enough that it will always be there? You know, Jesus says that the church will endure. And he says not even the gates of hell will prevail against it, right? So what's your hub? What are you revolving around? What are you returning to week in and week out, right? My encouragement is for us as a people to gather weekly, and sometimes more than weekly, around the pulpit, the font, and the altar. And really, it's really important to grasp the 3D nature of those things, right? To see pulpit, font, altar. That's why we have these 3D things. We're actually gathering around these things, the people gathering around these things. And it's a 3-dimensional activity we're going to do as a family. It may be one of the only activities a family does together in a week. Their lives are so fragmented and going different directions. But it's an identity builder. And that's really what we're aiming after here, is this cohesive identity in, first of all, in the individual family, but in the church family. And where I really want to help people appreciate is after you go through all this and you see the claims our culture is trying to make on us, and you see how media impacts us and the way it's trying to tell truth and the way it's trying to basically shape identity and the way it's trying to say, make me the hub, make me the hub. And to realize that for media to be the hub, you're just making a hub out of a pixel, little pixels, and that's not going to hold. It's not. Because one day our young people will be in our shoes, and it'll be the other people who will pass them by technologically. Because when I was a kid, it was the VCR my parents needed help with, right? Now I'm the one saying, I can't make this dang thing work. And my kids say, well, let me show you how you do that, right? And they can, it's going to be them. That hub won't be strong enough. So what is it? And I'm suggesting, at least I'm taking Jesus at his word here. He says this is gonna be here. So I'm gonna make that my hub, pulpit font altar. We're gonna gather around that thing. This is a family event that we're gonna do week in and week out. And this is going to be the thing that will sustain us no matter what else around us comes and goes. So I'm gonna stop there. And